The farmer's market was loud and cheerful that Saturday morning. Kids ran between the fruit stands. Fresh bread smells filled the air. People laughed and talked as they bought tomatoes, honey, and flowers. Then, without warning, three dark SUVs stopped at the edge of the market. Doors opened fast. Armed federal agents stepped out and began moving through the crowd. Within seconds, they surrounded one woman holding a small bag of peaches. That woman was federal judge Elena Navarro. And before anyone could understand what was happening, immigration agents were putting handcuffs on a sitting federal judge in the middle of a farmer's market. Before we go further, tell me where you're watching from today. And if stories like this grab your attention, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Now let's continue, because what happened next shocked the entire country. Judge Elena Navarro was not just any person. She was a respected federal judge known for being calm, careful, and fair. She had spent years on the bench. Lawyers trusted her rulings. Court staff respected her. Many young Latino law students looked up to her. She had worked hard to reach that position. That morning, she wasn't thinking about courtrooms or legal battles. She was simply enjoying a quiet weekend. She walked slowly past a vegetable stand run by an older farmer named Earl Whitaker. He greeted her like he did every week. "Morning, Judge," he said. Elena smiled and picked up a few peaches. "Best ones today?" she asked. "Sweetest you'll find." She laughed softly and paid him. Nothing about the moment felt unusual. But across the street, three vehicles had already stopped. Inside one of them sat Agent Victor Hale, a senior officer with Immigration and Customs Enforcement. He stared through dark sunglasses while looking at a printed photo. The photo showed Judge Elena Navarro. Beside him sat two other agents, Caleb Vance and Logan Price. Victor Hale spoke quietly. "That's her." Logan looked confused. "Sir, are we sure?" Victor did not hesitate. "We have the warrant." Orders came from high up. Caleb shifted uncomfortably. "That's a federal judge." Victor looked straight ahead. "Today, she's a suspect." The doors opened. The agents stepped out. At first, shoppers thought they were just police passing through. But the agents walked directly toward Elena Navarro. People started noticing. Phones slowly came out. One woman whispered, "What's going on?" Another person stepped aside as the agents closed in. Elena had just turned away from the fruit stand when she noticed the men walking toward her. She looked confused but calm. Victor Hale spoke first. "Elena Navarro." She nodded slowly. "Yes." He held up a badge. "Immigration and Customs Enforcement." The judge frowned. "I'm sorry, is there a problem?" The entire market went quiet. Victor's voice turned cold. "You are being detained under federal authority." For a moment, nobody moved. Earl Whitaker stared in disbelief. "You can't be serious," he muttered. Elena blinked slowly. "There must be a mistake," she said calmly. Caleb Vance stepped forward with handcuffs. "Turn around, please." The crowd gasped. Someone shouted, "That's a judge." Another voice yelled, "What are they doing?" Phones were now everywhere recording. Elena kept her voice steady. "Agent, you understand who I am." Victor Hale leaned closer. "Yes," he said quietly. Then he added something that made the people closest to them freeze. "Doesn't change what you are." Elena's eyes hardened. "And what exactly do you think that is?" Victor's answer came with a small smile. "Someone who doesn't belong." A few people nearby heard it. A young man holding a phone whispered, "Did he just say that?" The cuffs clicked around Elena's wrists. Gasps spread through the market. Earl Whitaker slammed his hand on the fruit table. This is insane." Caleb looked nervous as the crowd grew louder. "Sir, we should move." Victor nodded. They began escorting the judge toward this SUV. Alina walked with dignity, even with her hands cuffed. She looked directly at Victor Hale. "You're making a very serious mistake." Victor shrugged. "We'll let the system figure that out." As they reached the vehicle, a woman shouted from the crowd, "She's a federal judge. You can't just grab her." Another voice yelled, "This is racism." Victor ignored them. But then Alina spoke again, this time louder so everyone could hear. "I have served this country's justice system for 21 years. The crowd fell silent. She continued, "And today you arrest me in a farmer's market with no explanation." Victor opened the SUV door. "You'll get your explanation." Alina looked straight at him. "No," she said quietly. "You will." The door slammed shut. The SUVs drove away. But something important had already happened. More than 40 people had filmed the arrest. Within minutes, the videos started spreading online. Clips showed the agents surrounding the judge. Clips showed the handcuffs. Clips showed Victor Hale's cold expression. But the moment that exploded across the internet was the line many people clearly heard. "Someone who doesn't belong." By the time the SUVs reached the federal holding facility, the video had already been viewed hundreds of thousands of times. By the end of the day, it would be millions. Inside the SUV, Alina Navarro sat quietly. Her wrists hurt from the cuffs, but her face stayed calm. Across from her sat Caleb Vance. He looked uncomfortable. He finally spoke. "Judge, I just follow orders." Alina looked at him. History is full of people who said that. Caleb had no answer. At the detention center, Victor Hale signed paperwork with confidence. He believed the operation had gone exactly as planned. He thought the story would end quickly. A quiet investigation. A quiet charge. A quiet disappearance from the bench. But something he did not understand was already starting to happen. The videos were spreading faster than anyone expected. Lawyers were watching them. Civil rights groups were watching them. Journalists were watching them. And inside a powerful law firm across the city, one man watched the video 3 times without speaking. His name was attorney Rafael Ibarra. When the clip ended, he slowly leaned back in his chair. Then he said just 5 words. "They arrested the wrong person." Because Rafael Ibarra knew something the agents did not. And once that truth came out, the cost of that arrest would reach $13 million. And the careers of several federal agents would never recover. By the time the sun began to set that same day, the arrest of Judge Alina Navarro was no longer just a strange moment at a farmer's market. It had become a national story. The video clips were everywhere. People replayed the same few seconds again and again. The agents surrounding the judge, the handcuffs, the stunned faces in the crowd, and most of all, the line that many people clearly heard. "Someone who doesn't belong." News stations started calling witnesses. Social media exploded with questions. How could immigration agents arrest a sitting federal judge in public? What evidence could possibly justify that? And why did it happen in such an aggressive way? Inside the detention facility, Alina Navarro sat alone in a small interview room. The metal table was cold. The walls were plain gray. She looked calm, but her mind was working quickly. She had spent over 20 years inside courtrooms. She knew how federal procedures worked. She knew what a lawful arrest should look like. And what had happened at the market did not feel right. Across the hallway, Agent Victor Hale reviewed the paperwork with a serious face. Next to him sat Agent Logan Price, who looked nervous. Logan finally spoke. "Sir, the video is everywhere." Victor did not look up. "Let people talk." Logan hesitated. "But they're saying we targeted her because she's Latina." Victor's jaw tightened. "They can say whatever they want." Logan lowered his voice. "She's a federal judge." Victor finally looked at him. "And?" Logan didn't answer. Victor leaned forward. "We had a warrant." Logan nodded slowly. "Yes, sir." But inside, he was starting to worry, because the situation outside was growing fast. Reporters were already gathering outside the detention building. Civil rights groups began demanding answers. Even some government officials were asking questions. Meanwhile, inside a tall office building downtown, attorney Rafael Ibarra was making phone calls. Rafael was one of the most respected civil rights lawyers in the country. He had spent years fighting government abuse cases. And the moment he saw the arrest video, he recognized something serious. He called one of his associates. "Get me the arrest warrant," Rafael said. "Right away." "Yes, now." Within an hour, the document arrived. Rafael read it carefully. Then he read it again. His eyebrows slowly lowered. "This makes no sense," he said quietly. His assistant looked confused. "What do you mean?" Rafael pointed to the page. "This warrant claims Alina Navarro is connected to an immigration fraud investigation." The assistant nodded. "That's what the agent said." Rafael shook his head. "No." He tapped the paper again. "This document is full of holes." "What kind of holes?" Rafael leaned back. "For one thing, the address connected to the investigation is wrong." The assistant blinked. "Wrong?" "Yes." He turned the page. "And the identification number listed here," he paused, "belongs to someone else." The room went silent. The assistant spoke slowly. "Are you saying they arrested the wrong person?" Rafael's answer was calm. "I'm saying this arrest should never have happened." He stood up. "Prepare a legal team." "For what?" Rafael looked toward the window. "For a lawsuit that will shake the federal government." Back at the detention center, Alina Navarro was finally brought into an interrogation room. Victor Hale sat across from her. A recorder sat on the table. Victor pressed the button. "Interview begins at 6:12 p.m. Alina folded her hands calmly. Victor looked at her for a moment. "You understand why you're here?" Alina shook her head. "No." Victor slid a file across the table. "You've been linked to an immigration identity operation." Alina stared at the file. Then she slowly pushed it back. "That accusation is absurd." Victor's voice hardened. "You may want to cooperate." Alina met his eyes. "I have done nothing wrong." Victor leaned closer. "People hide things." Alina stayed calm. "You arrested a federal judge in public without verifying basic facts." Victor smirked slightly. "We verified enough." Alina paused. Then she said something that made Victor uncomfortable. "Did you read the warrant yourself?" Victor hesitated for a fraction of a second. "Yes." Alina tilted her head slightly. "Then you should already know something." Victor narrowed his eyes. "Know what?" Her voice was quiet. "The identification number on that document does not belong to me." Victor froze. Just for a second. He quickly recovered. "We'll confirm that." Alina leaned back. "You should." Because at that same moment, the problem was getting bigger outside. 3 major news networks had already picked up the story. Legal experts began reviewing the video. One former federal prosecutor said something that made the situation even worse for the agents. This arrest raises serious constitutional concerns. Another legal analyst added, if the warrant is flawed, the government could face enormous liability. Meanwhile, inside Rafael Ibarra's office, the legal team had finished verifying something critical. One of the junior lawyers spoke first. Rafael, we confirmed it. Rafael looked up. The identification number? The lawyer nodded. It belongs to a different woman in another state. The room fell silent. Rafael slowly closed the file. That means they never verified her identity. Someone asked quietly, so what happens now? Rafael answered without hesitation. Now we file. How big? Rafael looked directly at them. As big as possible. Across the city, Victor Hale finally received a call from his supervisor. He answered quickly. This is Hale. The voice on the other end sounded tense. Turn on the news. Victor frowned. Why? Just do it. He grabbed the remote in the office and switched on the television. A reporter was speaking live. Behind her was the same farmer's market where the arrest had happened. Civil rights attorneys are now reviewing the legality of the arrest of federal judge Elena Navarro. Sources say the warrant used by ICE agents may contain serious identification errors. Victor's stomach tightened. The reporter continued. If those errors are confirmed, this could become one of the most expensive wrongful arrest cases involving federal officers in recent years. Victor turned off the TV. His face had lost its confidence. For the first time that day, he realized something. This situation was no longer under his control. And if the warrant truly was wrong, the price of that mistake would not just be embarrassment. It could cost the government millions of dollars and destroy the careers of everyone involved. But the worst part was something Victor still did not know. Because the most damaging evidence from the farmer's market had not been released yet. And when it finally appeared, the entire country would hear exactly what Agent Victor Hale said during that arrest. The next morning, the story exploded. By sunrise, the arrest of Judge Elena Navarro was the top headline across the country. News anchors repeated the same shocking words over and over. A sitting federal judge arrested in a farmer's market. Every major network showed the same clips. The agents surrounding her. The handcuffs closing around her wrists. The stunned crowd watching in silence. But behind the scenes, something even bigger was about to surface. Inside the office of attorney Rafael Ibarra, the legal team had been working all night. Coffee cups covered the desks. Computer screens glowed in the dark room. One of the younger lawyers rushed in holding a phone. You need to see this. Rafael looked up. What is it? The lawyer turned the screen around. It's a longer video from the arrest. Rafael leaned forward. Play it. The clip started. It was filmed by a woman standing only a few feet away from the agents. The angle was clear. The sound was sharp. The camera showed Agent Victor Hale stepping up to Judge Navarro. Then the moment came. Elena calmly asked, "You understand who I am?" Victor answered quietly, "Yes." Then the next sentence came through the phone speakers clearly. "Doesn't change what you are." Elena responded firmly. "And what exactly do you think that is?" Victor's voice followed. "Someone who doesn't belong." The room went silent. Rafael slowly stood up. "Send that to every network." One of the lawyers blinked. "All of them?" Rafael nodded once. Immediately. Within an hour, the video was everywhere. This time, the audio was crystal clear. Millions of people heard the line without any doubt. Someone who doesn't belong. News anchors replayed it again and again. Legal analysts reacted instantly. One former judge spoke during a live interview. If that statement was made during the arrest, it raises serious questions about bias and misconduct. Civil rights organizations demanded investigations. Lawmakers began asking for explanations. And suddenly the pressure on Agent Victor Hale became enormous. Inside the federal detention center, Victor sat in a small office watching the broadcast. The reporter repeated the audio clip. Victor's face went pale. He muted the television. Across the room, Agent Logan Price spoke quietly. "Sir, that doesn't look good." Victor glared at him. "You think I don't know that?" Logan shifted nervously. "They're calling it racial profiling." Victor stood up. "That's ridiculous." Logan didn't respond. Victor paced the room. "They're twisting my words." Logan finally said what he had been thinking all morning. "You did say it." Victor stopped walking. "You were there too." Logan nodded slowly. "Yes." Victor pointed toward the TV. "They don't know the full situation." Logan stayed silent, because deep down he knew something. The situation had already gone too far. Meanwhile, the legal team working for Judge Navarro moved quickly. By mid-morning, Rafael Ibarra filed an emergency motion demanding her immediate release. The document was powerful. It listed 3 major problems with the arrest. First, the warrant contained incorrect identification information. Second, the agents failed to properly confirm her identity. Third, statements made during the arrest suggested racial bias. When reporters read the filing, the story became even bigger. One legal expert said during a televised panel, "This case could result in a massive civil rights lawsuit." Another added, "If proven in court, damages could reach millions." Inside the detention center, the pressure reached a breaking point. Victor Hale received a direct call from his regional supervisor. He answered quickly. "Hale." The voice on the phone sounded angry. "What were you thinking?" Victor kept his voice steady. "We had a warrant." The supervisor snapped back. The warrant had the wrong identification number. Victor paused. "We were still verifying." "You arrested a federal judge in public." Victor tried to respond. "We believed she was connected." The supervisor cut him off. "And now the entire country thinks our agents targeted her because she's Latina." Victor clenched his jaw. "That's not what happened." The supervisor's answer was cold. "Then you better hope the investigation proves it." The call ended. Victor slowly lowered the phone. For the first time since the arrest, he felt real fear. Because he now understood something. This was no longer just a legal mistake. It had become a national scandal. Meanwhile, in a federal courtroom across the city, an emergency hearing was about to begin. Judge Olivia Hartwell entered the courtroom. The room was packed with reporters. Rafael Ibarra stood confidently at one table. Government lawyers sat nervously at the other. Judge Hartwell spoke firmly. "Let's address the immediate issue." She looked toward the government attorneys. "Why is Judge Elena Navarro still in custody?" One of the attorneys stood. "Your Honor, agents believed they had probable cause." Rafael interrupted. "With incorrect identification and flawed documentation." Judge Hartwell raised her hand. "Mr. Ibarra will have his turn." She looked back at the government lawyer. "Answer the question." The lawyer hesitated. "We are reviewing the warrant." Rafael spoke calmly. "Your Honor, my client was arrested publicly without proper verification, and agents made statements that strongly suggest bias." He pressed a button on a laptop. The courtroom speakers played the now famous audio. "Someone who doesn't belong." The courtroom became very quiet. Judge Hartwell's face hardened. She looked directly at the government lawyers. "Is that voice one of your agents?" The attorney swallowed. "Yes, Your Honor." Judge Hartwell leaned forward. "Then explain to me why a federal judge was placed in handcuffs based on a warrant containing incorrect information." No one answered. After several seconds, Judge Hartwell spoke again. "Judge Alina Navarro will be released immediately." Gasps spread across the courtroom. She continued, "And this court will review the conduct of the arresting officers." Within an hour, Alina Navarro walked out of the detention center. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. But she did not speak. Instead, Rafael Ibarra stepped forward. He looked directly at the cameras. "My client was wrongly arrested, publicly humiliated, and targeted under circumstances that demand accountability." One reporter asked loudly, "Are you planning to sue the federal government?" Rafael answered calmly, "Yes." "How much?" Rafael paused. Then he said the number that would soon appear in headlines everywhere: $13 million. Gasps came from the crowd of reporters, because everyone knew what that meant. This case was no longer just about one arrest. It had become a fight over power, justice, and accountability. And the agents who made that arrest at the farmer's market were about to learn something the hard way. A mistake like this could cost far more than their jobs. The courtroom was packed. The air was tense. Reporters, lawyers, civil rights activists, and curious onlookers filled every seat. At the front, Judge Olivia Hartwell presided, her expression unreadable but stern. Today would decide not just the immediate release of Judge Alina Navarro, but the cost of a reckless mistake that had shaken the federal system. Alina sat beside attorney Rafael Ibarra, her hands folded calmly. She looked at the room, the cameras, the agents, and didn't flinch. She had endured humiliation, public exposure, and the stress of being wrongfully detained. But now it was her turn to reclaim justice. The government lawyers stood. They looked uncomfortable, shuffling papers, avoiding eye contact with the judge, and certainly avoiding Alina herself. For weeks, their story had been falling apart. The flawed warrant, the misidentification, the viral video with Victor Hale's words. It had created a public and legal storm that no one could ignore. Rafael Ibarra began speaking, his voice calm but cutting. "Your Honor, this case is unprecedented, but the facts are undeniable. My client, a sitting federal judge, was publicly arrested in a farmer's market based on a warrant that contained incorrect identification. Agents involved made statements suggesting racial bias. The humiliation and emotional trauma suffered are real and measurable. We seek full accountability, including damages." He paused, letting the words sink in. Cameras clicked rapidly. Reporters whispered among themselves. Everyone in the courtroom knew this wasn't just about money. It was about sending a message. One by one, witnesses stepped forward. Shoppers at the farmer's market, including Earl Whitaker, described the chaos, the fear, and the confusion as the agents arrested Alina. One elderly man, tears in his eyes, said, "I've seen arrests before, but never like this." A judge in handcuffs in front of everyone. It felt wrong. Then came the bombshell. The experts Rafael had hired testified about the emotional and reputational damage. Psychologists explained the mental trauma. Media analysts described the viral nature of the incident and the permanent impact on Alina's public image. Each detail made it clear that this wasn't just a procedural error. It was a massive misjudgment with lasting consequences. Finally, the court turned to the agents involved. Victor Hale, Caleb Vance, and Logan Price were called. They sat silently as the evidence piled up. Their defense was thin. Their repeated insistence that they were just following orders now sounded hollow. Judge Hartwell looked at them and spoke sharply. "Your actions have consequences. A federal judge cannot be treated like a random suspect without due verification. Your failure has cost the government credibility and caused real harm." Victor Hale tried to defend himself. "Your Honor, we had a warrant." Hartwell raised her hand. "A warrant that was wrong. That is not a defense." The courtroom murmured. Even the government lawyers seemed uncomfortable. Then came the financial reckoning. Rafael Ibarra laid out the calculations for the damages. Emotional trauma, public humiliation, career disruption, and the viral spread of the incident, all quantified meticulously. The total number shocked everyone in the room: $13 million. Gasps erupted. Cameras captured the moment. Reporters scribbled furiously. On social media, the story exploded once more. Victor Hale's face went pale. Caleb Vance looked down at the floor. Logan Price whispered something to himself, unable to believe it. This was beyond suspension or reassignment. It was a public financial judgment that would follow them for life. Alina Navarro, however, remained calm. She had expected nothing less than justice, and now it had arrived. She stood when the ruling was read aloud. "Judge Navarro," Hartwell said, "you are free." The court recognizes the harm done and grants damages totaling $13 million to be paid by the federal agency responsible for your wrongful arrest. The courtroom erupted with applause and gasps. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed, but Elena didn't answer. She only nodded slightly to Rafael, who gave her a reassuring glance. Outside the courthouse, a crowd had gathered. People cheered as Elena emerged. Many held signs: "Justice for Alina Navarro" and "Stop racial profiling." The farmers' market where it all started had become a symbol of accountability. Alina paused briefly, looking around at the faces of supporters, reporters, and curious bystanders. Then she spoke softly but firmly, loud enough for the cameras to capture. This was never about money. It was about being treated with fairness and dignity. And today, that message has been sent. Behind the scenes, federal investigators began internal reviews. Policies on warrants, verification procedures, and training for agents were scrutinized. Careers were permanently altered. The agents involved faced disciplinary action, and Victor Hale's reputation was effectively destroyed. Meanwhile, Rafael Ibarra filed further lawsuits to ensure that similar mistakes would never happen again. Civil rights organizations hailed Alina's case as a landmark victory. Months later, the farmers' market returned to its quiet routine, but people still talked about what happened. Children who had been present asked their parents why a judge was arrested. Locals recounted the viral video. And for Alina Navarro, it was a reminder that courage, dignity, and truth could withstand the most public humiliation. The $13 million verdict wasn't just money. It was a warning, a lesson, a story the country would never forget. Victor Hale, Caleb Vance, and Logan Price moved on quietly. They were still federal agents, but their careers would always carry the stain of that arrest. And everywhere, people remembered the day ICE agents made a mistake that cost them far more than they ever imagined. Alina Navarro returned to her courtroom. She resumed her work with renewed resolve. Each ruling she made carried the weight of justice and the memory of a morning at a farmer's market that had changed everything. Because sometimes a single mistake can shake the system, and when it does, the cost can be more than anyone expects. The story of Judge Alina Navarro and the $13 million arrest would remain a lesson in justice, accountability, and the importance of treating every person with dignity, no matter who they are or where they come from.